All right. All right. We got it. I'm back. I'm back. Hold on. Let me send out. Let me retweet my live, make sure everything's good here. Holy cow. Sorry about that, everybody. That was it was literally something was wrong with the stream. I don't know what was going on, but I didn't have any of my ability to share screen or anything. So we're back. We're back. We got it figured out. Everything's good. Give me 1 second and we will get started. I'll let everybody get in here. Don't worry. I'll do this for us before we get started here. Put on some box. Everybody get back in here. As soon as everybody gets back in here, we'll start it again. I'll be back in 1 second. All right, we are so back. All right, let's get into this. As much as I love feeding the ducks, we got stuff to do today. All right, head right over to the map to start us off, and I don't even have my map up because I had to restart my whole computer. All right, go over to the map to start us off. Here we go. Obviously, you guys know Ukraine. Here's the Caspian Sea over here for all of you who don't know where that is. It's around. It's around. Remember, guys, if you want to get questions in, if you have questions about specific topics that I'm going over, the best way to do that is to ask those questions through Super Thanks. It's also the easiest way you can support me. I'll answer those questions live on stream. At the end, I do answer questions, but I definitely don't get to everybody's questions. And if you want your question answered, that's the easiest way you can do it. So just remember, you guys can do that the whole time. And without further ado, let's get into it. So we are going to come over here to the Krasnohorivka section of the front. We have confirmation that the Russians have entered into this town right here, into this portion of the town, rather, sorry. And we got that confirmation through a geolocated video of a Russian assault on the town. Tanks basically came across this open field right here, lined up right around this area and just began firing into these streets. The Ukrainians were forced to abandon their positions here and move back probably into this area and back into the industrial area across the railroad. Obviously, these houses and everything. They likely still do have a presence in this side of the town, but the Russians are very close, and the Russians are using this mine to launch attacks on the town. So this is big. This is significant. Krasnohorivka is an important frontline town. You know, it's on the front line of Donetsk. So this is a pretty massive deal, and the Russians will be looking to continue expanding into this city. I'm going to do a video going over some of the towns in the future and how I believe the battles will be directed in these towns. So, and I just was looking at Krasnohorivka, and I wanted to talk about it for a second. You have this huge industrial facility, again, right in the center of town, that will likely be used as the strong point, the defense point for maintaining, obviously, this front line, which is heavily fortified right here. And now the Russians are back behind that front line. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the Ukrainians set up a defensive line on this right here, defending from the Russians from the south, but also dealing with the pressure from the expansion up in the north, which we're going to talk about in just a second, and why Avdiivka is so important to the rest of this southern Donetsk front. So up here in Avdiivka, I guess it's outside of Avdiivka now. Here is the city. As you can see, there has been significant Russian progress out of the city. Here's Stepove, which was the front line for I don't even remember how long, along with Severne, all now firmly under Russian control. As you can see, And then today, and over the past probably two or 3 days, the Russians have successfully pushed into Orlivka. This town is now, according to Russian sources, completely captured. The Ukrainians have left the village, and as well as the village of Taneke down here. So 2 villages, important villages, because this was what was supposed to be the next line of defense for the Ukrainians after Avdeevka fell. This was the next prominent line, and the Russians just kind of ran right over that. So what this is starting to look like to me, as well as Berdichi, sorry, Berdichi is a majority of that has been captured. This part back here has not been captured, and then you have the town in between those 2 towns, which is Simenkivka, and that town will likely fall in the coming days, just because it's kind of getting put into a pretty bad salient right here, and there's literally 1 road out of it. There's no strong points. The only advantage to it is that it is up against this water reservoir sort of thing, which I don't actually know if there's water in it right now. So I don't know how well of a defensive point it makes, but this town will likely be abandoned. And then if you look at what happens after that, there is really not a lot back here. And if the Russians end up reaching Umansk really quick, that's going to be very, very, very unfortunate for the Ukrainians, and this whole situation is probably going to turn into a rout. It doesn't appear like the Ukrainians have a significant defense line behind Avdiivka, and this is something that we were going over and we were talking about, and I'm going to talk about it specifically right now. I had made mention that the Ukrainians were bringing in a large number of reserves to actually hold Avdiivka for a longer period of time than they did. And what I really do think what happened was the Ukrainians were not ready for the Russians to do that operation down here in the south, where they got in behind these fortifications. I think that these fortifications were supposed to hold for a much, much greater period of time. And with this collapse, the whole defense of Avdiivka just became basically impossible. But, the Ukrainian command did not want to abandon this town. So I believe that they brought in a good number of reserves into Selidov right here and Pokrovsk. And then as those reserves, as particularly the 3rd Azov Brigade, got absolutely annihilated in these staging towns. So as they got moved up, they got hit really hard. And then the relief effort that ended up arriving in Avdiivka was battered and degraded already from all of these deep strikes. I think the Russians kind of knew that it was coming, so they were very, very ready, and they were watching this area with their ISR very close, and they did some serious damage to the units that were moving in. And the relief force that actually arrived in Avdiivka to do some sort of deblocking operation, and then not necessarily like a deblock, like they were going to recapture the city or anything, but at least stabilize, slow down the Russians, allow for some sort of organized withdrawal, and organize the creation of a new defense line back here. And with how rapidly Avdiivka fell, I mean, I showed you guys on Deep State, and I can show you again if you want that. But it was basically the month of February. In the month of February, Avdiivka went from stable to completely captured by the Russians, and that was a massive collapse. And the Ukrainians just aren't ready for it back here. So we have very, very quick Russian progress compared to the rest of the SMO, except in the first months. The Russians are making extremely fast progress. These villages are falling day by day. Like 2 days ago, it was Stepove and Severne were announced by the Ministry of Defense. And now we have Orlivka, Taneke, and Berdichi all about to fall. So again, significant. The Russians are not letting up here. The number of glide bombs has not abated since Avdiivka. I thought it would have slowed down because Avdiivka was just a target-rich, very fluid environment, and perhaps that's still what the Russians are dealing with on the backside of Avdiivka. It's hard for me to tell because the OPSEC is pretty strong in this area, and we don't get a lot of combat footage right now. We get little snapshots of things, and if something really important happens, like the Abrams that was captured, that stuff is important. Which, by the way, the Abrams that was destroyed, sorry, not captured, but the Abrams that was destroyed is in this area somewhere, I believe, right around here. So it is likely that the Russians have passed that Abrams tank, and it is now in their possession, at least under their control. Does that mean that they're going to be able to get it out? Not necessarily right now. It's still dangerous, but it is likely under Russian control. So that you might see that in Moscow pretty soon. Who knows? Go back over to the map. The next line of defense, just so everybody can kind of get an idea. As you can see, there's not much behind this, right? Pretty open fields. The next solid line of defense that I think the Ukrainians can take up is something like this. And I'm just going to draw it with this line maker right here. Something like that, and try to hold as much of this as they can. So let's do this line width and make it, what color do you guys like? Yellow? We'll go yellow. So here is the potential new line of defense for the Ukrainians now. So this is, Avdiivka was obviously the first line of defense. This was supposed to be the second line. The Russians have already breached it and are already through it pretty much. I doubt that there's really any Ukrainian force even in Simkivka. I bet this whole area has been abandoned because there's just not a lot of artillery support. Everything is, it's very fluid. It's very chaotic. And now the Russians are going to begin pushing out. And if they immediately push out into Murmansk and then push down into here and start flanking Natiliov, that's going to be very bad, right? That's going to put Pervomaisky, that anybody in this area, into jeopardy. Anybody back here is going to be in jeopardy. Basically, anybody on this side of these reservoirs is going to be in a very dangerous position. So I expect that the line of defense will be along these little towns, along these reservoirs, and then down and try to hold Novelsky as long as possible. This is very important. You can see how much space is behind Novelsky. It really doesn't offer much in terms of defense, and it would allow the Russians to begin pressuring Krasnohorivka from the north. And that would be very, very bad for the Ukrainians. You can start to see how the defense in this region is really starting to kind of collapse. You can look really, I mean, you don't even have to look really close. You can just kind of see how it's a domino effect, right? Avdiivka, it was a salient. It was the line. It was holding back a lot of Russian soldiers. It was, it was an area that required a lot of attention. It is now gone. The Russians can now push out in all of these different directions. There is no Avdiivka-sized city back here at all. I mean, in this whole area, there's nothing as big as Avdiivka, right? There is Krasnohorivka, which is smaller, maybe Hinkry or Harinki, Harink. I don't know, whatever that is. But there's not a big town back here, right? There's no big urban defense points. So the Russians are going to push into this, and I think they're going to make pretty quick work of this rather undefended area, unless the Ukrainians figure out a way with artillery and FPV drones flying around and everything to fortify this line more significantly. But that takes weeks and weeks. So we'll see what they have. I'm under the impression right now that the Ukrainian defense behind Avdiivka is almost non-existent. That's what I'm picking up from pro-Ukrainian Telegram channels. They're talking about how we can prevent making these mistakes in the future and why the Russians are making so much progress. And what it really sounds like is that there was not a lot of time, energy, or money invested into defense lines behind the initial defense line, almost as if the Ukrainians never thought places like Avdiivka would fall. So that's interesting, to say the least. Go back over to the map. I want to talk about Ivanivsky because we have some interesting rumors coming out of there. Let's see. I have about half of the town now in what I would consider unconfirmed Russian control. I could probably adjust it a little bit down in the southern portion. I think the Russians have actually been confirmed to push in here, but I haven't found a geolocation for it. So the Russians are reported to have controlled half or more than half of the town. There's also rumors that the Ukrainians have retreated from Ivanivsky which would be really bad for Chasiv Yar, for Klishchivka, if the Ukrainians were forced out of here, which would not be surprising considering the number of glide bombs and everything coming down. If that stuff, if that has happened, if the Ukrainians have withdrawn from Ivanivsky, then remember the high ground here that I showed you guys, and remember I'll copy the link for the topographical map in here, I'll copy this link and put it in so you guys can use this as your resource. Copy. Here you go. I'll post it in the chat. This is the topographical map of Bakhmut. Well, the link I sends you to Bakhmut, but you can go over all of Ukraine. You guys can look at that. I'll take us over to that right now so I can just show you. So here's Bakhmut ready. Here's Ivanivsky. You can see that once Ivanivsky falls, the supply and logistics to hold this high ground become nearly impossible for the Ukrainians. So everything on this side of the canal will likely fall back under Russian control. And that means that the Russians will have this high ground that looks directly onto Chasiv Yar. Chasiv Yar is also high ground, so it doesn't really give an advantage, but at least you're not in the valley, right? Where the Russians are fighting, you can see everywhere they're fighting in Avdeevka right here, which is in the valley. Kromove right here is in the valley. This road, this high ground road that the Russians now control up to the cemetery right here is also on the high ground. So that is another significant area. And I expect the Russians to also begin operations in the north here to get up on this high ground. Well, like I said, Ivanivsky is so important because if they capture it, they likely capture this high ground, which then gives them a launching pad for operations on Chasiv Yar. And then if we zoom out even further, the importance of Bakhmut, Chasiv Yar become crystal clear here. So Bakhmut was the fortress city, Soledar, Bakhmut, that defended the high ground that looks down on the Kramatorsk, Slavyansk urban conglomeration, right? So this high ground is of vital importance, and there is nothing in here. There's no cities. You can see Soledar, Bakhmut, Klishchivka, Chasiv Yar, or maybe that's Kordumovka down here. Toretsk, Kramatorsk, obviously, Seversk. You have all of these, but there's nothing in this range. So if the Russians get back into here, there's no defenses. They'll be able to expand along this high ground and just be able to look down upon Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, Druzhkivka, and Konstantinivka, all from that high ground. So like I always say, if you guys want to know what the Russian playbook is, go find a topographical map, and you can pretty much figure out exactly where the Russians are going to go and why they're going to go there. Having elevation is so important. I posted a video on my Telegram or my Twitter. You can go, if you just search Bradley and then go to the most recent video, you can see Russian soldiers with an ATGM firing from Avdeevka, from either this Telecon, the waste heap, or a high building on this coke plant, and hitting a Bradley that was driving out on like this road right here. So, I mean, it gives you high ground, gives you all of the advantage that you need in a military sense. So the Russians really lean on that, as they should. It makes sense. Oh man, I'm thirsty. Okay. Back to the map. Do we have any more updates? I'm trying to remember. I don't think so. I do think that there has been some more expansion, even more than I have shown here, towards Terni and Yampolivka. But again, the geolocations in this area are kind of difficult, and we don't get as many. So that is still developing. And then up here in the north, you have Sinkivka, which the Ukrainians are now admitting that the Russians do have a foothold in the northern part of the village, and they are throwing everything that they possibly can to hold this. Remember, Sinkivka is like the last defense line before the Russians reach Kupiansk and make if the Russians get through Sinkivka and can put pressure on this road right here, that very much complicates the defense of this entire area. So that Sinkivka is really the straw that, if it's added to the camel's back, is going to break it, right? So the Russians are fighting hard up here, and mostly just still, it's still mostly just an attrition war up here. There's not a lot of large scale assaults going on. It's just artillery and glide bombs and stuff like that. So nothing overly significant. And then just, I wanted to show you guys down here. I think it's somewhere right here or right here. It could also be Crimea, but there was a Ukrainian special forces team that came down here on a boat, like a Zodiac, and a bunch of them got killed. So that's also on my, I think it's on my Twitter. I think I retweeted on my Twitter. I deleted off my Telegram because I did not know if it was old, but it appears to be new. So that's another waste of valuable human resources for no reason. What are you going to do? It's unfortunate. All right. Let me go to my Twitter. Bookmarks. I'm going to show you guys some stuff on Twitter. We're going to talk about some of the stuff that is happening around the world and not just in Ukraine as well. All right. So I wanted to show you guys this video. It is it's a Russian or a Ukrainian complaining about the situation in Chasiv Yar with Russian bombers.
Небо над Часов Яром. И безнаказанная русская авиация летает. И вот так вот они уничтожают все.
Yeah, I wonder why they're destroying everything. Is it maybe because there's guys with guns that are shooting at them in those houses? Maybe that's why they're dropping bombs there. Just a guess, just a shot in the dark from me. But as you can see, that is a significant omission. And it's really a reason why you're seeing all of these claims that Su-34s are being shot down daily by the Ukrainian MOD. That's not happening. There's no proof for these events happening. It's just a Ministry of Defense claim because they're getting absolutely destroyed by these glide bombs. It's becoming a real issue. They're losing strong defensive positions much quicker. The buildings that were normally safer for them to sleep in and rest in are now being absolutely just decimated by these glide bombs. That's no longer a Iskander strike that is, coming in. It's nothing like that. It's now this really cheap 1,500-pound glide bomb that apparently that the Russian infantry and Russian aviation are now working much better together. There's a lot more experience between the two branches in communication and stuff. So now the strikes are happening in a much more timely fashion and with much more effect. So the battlefield is just changing for the Ukrainians. And as you can see, the frontline air defense networks are being degraded almost to nothing. Like you said, these planes are unpunished, clearly flying within air defense range. If you can see the planes and their contrails up in the sky, that is well within most medium to long range air defense range. So Buk or any larger system like that, and it's just not. They're not being shot at. So it means that Russia is now gaining air superiority and could likely have air supremacy shortly, which would be very bad news for frontline Ukrainian units. All right. I wanted to show you guys this. We have reports that the rail track connecting Rostov to Crimea is nearing completion. Basically, there is already a connection, so supply can make it from Rostov to Crimea via the land bridge. However, the single one connected railroad is not finished, I don't believe yet, but that is on the docket. As you can see, you have civilian contractors down here working, building this land bridge and nullifying the risk of the Kerch Bridge being destroyed and Crimea being cut off, even though it would they would be able to keep it supplied and stuff. So it still doesn't make much sense, but you know, it is what it is. Here is Orlivka. As you can see, there is some water in some of these reservoirs. It's hard to tell which ones have water and which ones don't. But you can see this is just hell. I mean, glide bombs, artillery's working constantly. Here you can see MLRS rockets landing in a grid zone targeted by the Ukrainians. So this is Orlivka getting shelled, and then here you can see the Ukrainian units, some of the Ukrainian units that were in Orlivka that are now evacuating and walking out through the fields. So again, significant. The Russians seem to have a very, very strong initiative and are pushing things very aggressively. So right here, so we had Transnistria had come forward and basically asked the Russian Foreign Ministry to protect the interests of the residents of the breakaway Republic of Moldova. I'll show you guys on a map where this is. So this is exactly what they say. I'll just read the quote. Quote, protecting the interests and residents of Pridnestrovia, our compatriots, is one of the priorities. All requests are always carefully considered by the Russian relevant departments, the Russian Foreign Ministry told TASS. So what this appears to me to be is the beginning of exactly what you saw in the Donbass with the eventual annexation of the oblasts that are now Russian. Sort of this, you know, we're getting all of this pressure because at the beginning, I mean, the Ukrainians were shelling Donetsk, but there was sort of at least a peace, and there was some talk of a Ukrainian offensive, and that's why the Russians went in, whatever you choose to believe. What ended up happening is the oblasts, the breakaway governments in those oblasts basically asked the Russian military or the Russian government for protection, recognizing their ethnic background and so on and so forth. And then the Russians accepted and ended up defending them. But with the SMO, that is exactly what I think you're looking at in Transnistria. You're going to see a similar thing. You won't see an SMO, but this is the way that these breakaway republics are going to secure their future. There are Russian citizens there. There are Russian military there. So it's already a tripwire. Ukraine is obviously on the back foot. They have pulled out of Krinky and sent a bunch of their brigades that were working on that operation in the Kherson, Nikolaev, Odessa region to the east. So the timing is very suspicious. The way that they ask the question is very open. What does protect mean? What is the exact pressure from Moldova? You know, some are claiming it's economic, but do you really, I mean, I guess you need protection from the economic pressure, but they've been under economic pressure since they first existed. The timing is just very, very confusing and coincidental. And I believe that you're going to see something in this area progress past this one question. Yeah, there's over 200, I think there's 220,000 Russian passport holders in the breakaway republic. So it is not insignificant. These are Russian citizens that will be protected by the Russian government. And I mean, it kind of puts an end to the question. It would put an end to the question of, you know, Odessa. Like, you can't have a Russian breakaway republic that's separated by a hostile Ukraine and surrounded by NATO. You know, that's just not going to happen. So that would definitely solve the Odessa question for everybody who's curious. Let's see. I saw a question. Scott, what's your take on the American soldier putting up a flag with the Russian army in Avdeevka? It's confusing. That's confusing is all get out. I don't get that at all. I don't care. Whatever. Put up whatever flag wherever you want. but you don't, if you're going to fight with the Russian military, it's not really, I just don't know why you're planting an American flag. Yeah, you're an American. That's cool. Wear an American patch, whatever. But the American flag thing is really weird because you're not claiming it for America. That's why you put a flag up, is you're claiming it for somewhere. You know, Wagner had their flag. The Russians have the Russian flag, and then their victory banner, which is like the Soviet-looking flag, which is the Red Army banner. And then you have different groups have their own insignias and stuff. So, but an American flag in Avdiivka in a war between Ukraine and Russia, when it's the side not being supported by the Americans capturing the territory, it's very confusing and just weird. But hey, what does it matter? It's just a little, they do a little bit of trolling, so it doesn't matter at all. The Russia, I just posted this. Basically, it says Russia is closely studying the request from the Transnistrian Council of Deputies on assistance in both military and economic forms. I read an article where it said that they are receiving both economic and like kinetic pressure. So both of those were asked of Russia. I'm going to read this as well. This is just an article from the National News. Israel has planned for a war in South Lebanon to remove Hezbollah from the border, and the military group is preparing to face all scenarios, including a ground invasion. Military and security sources in both countries told the National. So this is Lebanon and in Israel. Both sides are talking like they're going to fight, which is not a good sign. It means both sides are ready for it. Signs that a ceasefire might be imminent in Gaza have raised the fears that Israel will turn attention to South Lebanon, where it has been engaged in cross-border fire with the powerful, heavily armed Iranian-backed group since October 8th. So this is interesting because Israel hasn't won in Gaza, and it's been going on for a very long time. The U.S. is having difficulty maintaining Israel's combat capability while maintaining Ukraine's combat capability. You're starting to see how it's all starting to come back. You know, the U.S. is not built for endurance wars. They're not built for long, drawn-out conflicts, protracted conflicts. They're meant to go in, wipe a country off the face of the earth, and put up their government, and then they have a peacekeeping force afterwards. That's what the U.S. does. That's what their weapons are designed for. Since after the collapse of the Soviet Union, everything's been focused on the war on terror, and they just can't produce enough to keep these wars going. So now you're talking about a expansion of the war in Gaza, which is already going pretty bad for the Israelis. I don't understand. For me, I'm very curious to see how the domestic situation in Israel holds up with this, because the reason why 2006 failed so poorly was the immense pressure that was put onto the Israeli population in northern Israel during that 2006 invasion. All that Iran has to do with any of their militias is basically just wait out the Israelis. Like that's the end game. They control the escalation ladder right now. They decide when and where they want to hit. They don't want the U.S. to get involved. They want Israel to still feel like they have to get involved, and really just stretching Israel out until, and this is how I see it, until the internal power struggles, the internal conflicts that are going on in Israel with their court system, with everything. I mean, there are issues in Israel. There were issues before October 7th, and October 7th just kind of distracted everybody from those issues, but they're underlying, they're still there, they haven't gone away, and they will come back. So the longer this goes, the more people start to doubt the Netanyahu government, their ability to actually protect them, to actually finish the war in Gaza. It's not an unpopular war necessarily, but the way that they're going about it is neither, it's not, it looks bad. It looks like they're genociding. I mean, they are, in my personal opinion, this is a genocide, as well as not being successful in actually defeating accomplishing the military objective in Gaza, right? So it's turned into this 5-month bogged down, horrible situation. And now you're looking at a possible war in southern Lebanon, which, if we look historically, has not been particularly favorable for Israel. It's just, the whole situation is just kind of, it's not great for Israel. It's not great for the U.S. And I feel like the U.S. really should have done more to prevent Israel from doing what they did in Gaza, and they just didn't. And so now the U.S. is dealing with, it's like dealing with Israel, which it can't control, and then also dealing with Iran, who hates Israel. They both hate each other. They're both fighting, but the U.S. does not want a war in the Middle East right now. They're trying to de-escalate every single possible way they can. When it comes to Ukraine, they're de-escalating. They're saying like, we're never going to send troops, after Macron said we're going to send troops. By the way, we talked about it yesterday or a couple of days ago, but French President Emmanuel Macron came out and said that he was going to, they haven't taken anything off the table. There's a possibility that French troops could go into Ukraine. But immediately after that, the EU, NATO, Germany, Britain, multiple other countries, the U.S., all came out. Stoltenberg came out. They all said, nope, we are not sending troops into Ukraine. So I don't know if that was just a feeler. They're putting out feelers to see how that was going to work out, but it was a disaster. And I think it really goes to show how bad the Ukraine situation is going, how bad the situation in the Middle East is starting to become. You still don't have control over shipping with the Houthis. So you have Russia, who the U.S. wants to deal with. You have China, who the U.S. knows they're going to have to deal with here soon. And you have Iran, who the U.S. is currently trying to deal with in a non-aggressive way, I guess you would say. They're just taking punches. They had those guys get killed. And yeah, they're doing some retaliatory strikes, but nothing that you would expect from the U.S. So it really just feels like it's like this. It's like dough, right? The U.S. is just this ball of dough, and it's just getting stretched and stretched and stretched. And that works when you're flexible, but the U.S. is getting less and less flexible now, and it's getting stretched further and further and further. So I think that these next coming years are going to be very, very interesting globally. Here we go. We got a question. Details, please, on how Russia captured and lost Liman and protects and prospects for recapturing. Let's see. Please use daily the blue line trench map Weeb is using. He's someone else's map too. Thanks. Okay, I might do this on my next stream since I don't have that up right now. But I can show you how it fell on my map. So if we go over here, you can see Liman right here. Basically, the Russians were holding a defense line. So after Kharkov had happened, right, the Ukrainians had pushed the Russians out of this section of Kharkov, had pushed them back over the Oskal River right here. They hadn't captured all of this yet, and the fighting in the Kremena Forest hadn't begun yet. So the front line was basically like this, down around Liman. Yeah, like that, and then down here over this. Okay, so right there. All right. So that line is thin. Oh, can't get it. Okay. We're going to go that color. Okay. So there's the front line. And then what ended up happening was the Ukrainians pushed through these lines because, again, the Russians did not have strong defensive lines here. They also did not have a lot of reserves to throw to plug holes. So the Ukrainians were taking advantage of that, just like the Russians are now behind Avdiivka. It's almost the exact same thing. They ended up coming in here and almost surrounding the Russian defense line. Ended up looking something like this, and they were kind of surrounded. And then they were able to end up breaking the surrounding and then retreat out back towards Kremenna. And then the Ukrainians pushed through the forest and tried to reach Kremenna from the north and the south for months and months, lost a ton of guys in here, and then never ended up achieving that goal, which would have been very significant. A lot of commentators say that the Ukrainians should have continued and just invested everything at this exact moment in this direction, recaptured Severodonetsk, and started putting pressure on Luhansk and Donetsk from the backside. But they didn't, and the Russians were able to stabilize and figured everything out. So I hope that answers your question. Sorry I didn't use the map you wanted, but I don't even know where the link is for that, so I'd have to go look for it. He wants blue. He wants blue because he's colorblind, but is it like the whole map has to be blue, or does it have to be like, can he not see green? Is that the problem? DM me, whoever asked that question. Let's see, who was it? This guy? Yahoo. DM me on Telegram or Twitter, and I will have a full conversation with you if you could not see my the colors I was using. Apologies for that, good sir. All right, if you guys have questions, go ahead and get your questions in right now. We're running at 41 minutes, so we got probably I got probably 20 minutes of questions. If you guys want to get some in right now, talk about anything, I do not care. I'm going to go get some water. I will be right. Okay, I'm back. Sorry, guys. Sorry. Let's see. Question. Do you ever get tired of all the weird claims made by Ukrainian news? Once again, thanks for all the work you do. Yeah, dude, it's exhausting. The most annoying part about those weird claims is that people believe it at face value. Ukraine Battle Maps is one of the best examples of this, where his entire following is basically based on this idea that everything that the Ukrainian MOD says is true. So, Russia lost 1,027 soldiers or something every day for the last 2 years. And that's just, it's a war. You're dealing with it. But yeah, the claims never surprise me. They always get more and more extreme. It's people that just are not even remotely living in reality. It's incredibly uncomfortable to think about people literally believe things like Ghost of Kiev and stuff like that. Just like no common sense, no critical thinking skills, no ability to do any research or anything like that. It's kind of Emmanuel Macron held an emergency meeting with European leaders yesterday about sending European troops. Germany, Britain said, yeah, because they know it's going to happen. None of those armies, none of these European armies, not Germany, Britain, or Poland, are ready to go to war. They've given away everything that they have in terms of surplus. They've given them a good amount away of what they actually have for their military. Poland is in the middle of revamping its entire military. It's just supposedly put in orders for billions of dollars worth of equipment. So we will see that eventually in Poland, but they're still rebuilding. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania don't have anything to begin with. Finland, Sweden, the Nordic countries have all given away a good majority of their equipment. Germany has given away everything it can give away that isn't directly falling into its stocks. And as I'm saying, the U.S. can't even support a proxy in terms of the shell consumption, in terms of everything. How do you expect them to fight a war? Everything is low right now. I would say that this is probably the time when the U.S.'s opponents could be the most bullish. right? They can go around and do basically whatever they want because they if you can do simple math, you know that the U.S. is not in a position to fight a war. Can it go and strike the shit out of a country tomorrow? Absolutely. It has aircraft carriers, it has missiles, it has artillery shells. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that if the U.S. was to get into a proxy war like Russia is in right now, and they fight for the next 2, 3, 4 years, without even just 1 year, without instantly going onto a war footing and you're changing your economy, it's going to be a difficult fight. So that's what I'm referring to. I'm not referring to some 2003 Iraq operation where they go in and just kick the shit out of everybody. That's not what I'm talking about. Let's see. Thank you for the super thanks. I appreciate it, man. What about France's air defense systems? Do they have more possibilities to give Ukraine something? France has not sent almost any weapons. Yeah, well, France just doesn't have that many weapons to send. None of these countries do. Britain doesn't. France doesn't. Germany had the most, and they still really couldn't produce that much. The U.S. is the only one who has a good amount of stuff that they could potentially send, but they're not going to because none of it makes sense for Ukraine. Abrams don't make sense for Ukraine, and they can't really afford to give away their Abrams. We've seen Patriots getting hit. I mean, I don't think you're going to see more Patriots getting delivered, anything like that. So, yeah. Here we go. Where are the VDV forces? Odessa's future. The VDV are all around. I think they're currently, the 155th Marine Brigade, I believe, is down here near Vuhledar. But they're just around. They're the best of the best. So you bring them in when you need them. You don't really. They're not like they don't hold positions on the front unless it's super necessary. And then prospects for Odessa, I covered that a little bit earlier in my conversation, but it depends on how this Transnistria thing plays out. If they decide that they are going to offer the protection that they require, I think that basically seals the fate for this southern region of Ukraine, right? I think that if the Russians agree to anything like that, they cannot leave this exposed. Like I said, with an enemy state right here and with NATO right up against it, it won't survive. It won't exist. So unless it's potentially under Russia's nuclear protection, but that would also be very risky for Russia to do. So I'm interested to see how it plays out. But if the Russians agree to the defense or protection, I guess you would say, of the Russian population here, just like it was with the Donbass, I could definitely see this whole region eventually. I mean, it just has to, right? And that makes sense for the Russian side of things because they probably want almost all of this anyway. So that's the way I see that going. Questions. I heard there was a buildup of forces in Poland, Ukrainian border. You think U.S. and no, I haven't heard about any buildup. I mean, they did exercises. I think those exercises are now done. I don't know for sure, but I think those exercises are now done. So no, I don't think that there's any buildup that you should be concerned about. I don't think the U.S. wants any part of any conflict right now. I don't think Poland does. I think Poland is actually more interested in getting a piece of Ukraine than helping Ukraine anymore. That's why you're seeing the border today, the border almost completely closed down to trade and shipping. So, it's becoming much more difficult for the Ukrainian state to operate. And you're seeing the results on the front line. Let's see. More questions? Any more questions? I don't see any questions. So I think that's where I'm going to wrap it up today, guys. Thank you so much. I will be definitely doing a show tomorrow. I think I'm going to do a show later in the day. I'm trying to like split it up so it's like half European audience, half American audience, right? Because those are my two kind of demographics. So I'm trying to do shows earlier in the day for my Euros and shows later for my American bros. So I appreciate you all. Please like and subscribe on this. I really can't thank you guys enough for allowing me to do this. You're the best. I appreciate you so much, and I appreciate everybody watching today. Please take care and be safe, everybody. The world is dangerous. Be safe. I love you. Goodbye.